The question was, if there is unconscious bias, just to repeat it so I'm making sure I get it right, if there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
The question is, given that there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
So number one, so when I speak about white privilege, yes, so when I speak about white privilege, I'm speaking specifically about behavior. Okay, there have been no studies, and really I've looked at these studies, the connection between what they call implicit bias, this is their favorite phrase now, implicit bias, unconscious bias, and biased behavior has yet to be proven at any level that is even remotely necessary to be used in, for example, a courtroom, which is why it's never been used in a courtroom. It is also true that there is no way, there really isn't, there's been no proven way to alleviate what they call unconscious bias, which means that we're ghost hunting. So what I would suggest is that if there is unconscious bias, and I'll acknowledge the possibility or the reality of unconscious bias, if there is, then I need you to I don't care about what's in people's heads so much as what they do. So if you point me to a racist behavior, don't worry, I'll let you respond. If you point me to a racist behavior, I'm happy to stand alongside you and protest it. What I can't do is protest about things in people's head that I don't know about because I'm not a mind reader.
Okay, so that's a really interesting response, and to that I have two questions. Firstly, what I've heard you say that this is something that, the way people think doesn't affect their behavior. So that's the first thing you've said. So I'm really curious if you can kind of give me another example of a thought that somebody has which doesn't affect their behavior. Like, do people who, support Trump not vote for him? Like, I'm very curious about that.
Yes.
And secondly, so the second thing that I want to ask is that if it's something it's hard to fix, does it mean we shouldn't do anything about it? Because you said, I don't know if we can change how people think. Does that mean we shouldn't try?
I mean, first of all, not a great impression. But beyond that, my voice isn't that low. But beyond that, as far as the first question, which is, do people have thoughts that don't manifest in behavior? Yes, all the time.
For instance?
For instance, every thought that you have about walking up here and strangling me right now. I assume like we have thoughts all the time that don't manifest in behavior, and this is true every single day. We consider thoughts that cross our minds. And the problem with unconscious bias is the idea is you don't even know that you're having the thought, right? So how can you stop it if you don't even know that you're having it? But then we should be able to gauge the unconscious bias and its impact on behavior. That's why it's unconscious bias as opposed to conscious bias. Right? The idea behind unconscious bias is that it's not even a ghost, it's a ghost of a ghost, because you don't even know you're having the thought. So people, the whole idea behind diversity training is the idea that you can retrain people to stop their chain of thought in order so that it doesn't manifest in behavior. I don't think that every thought manifests in behavior. If it did, then every time a man saw a good-looking woman walk down the street, a straight man saw a good-looking woman down the street, we'd have a real mess on our hands. So the second question, the idea was a little too broad for me to respond to, which is, just because something is tough, don't we have to face up to it? Yes, we have to face up to tough things all the time. And one of the tough things I would suggest that we face up to is that you have a lot more control over your own behavior and the decisions you make than the supposedly widespread unconscious bias of people you've never met.
Coming, Ben. I had zero disagreements with you until tonight, fortunately. But
wow.
This is a good one. Yeah. First of all, though, real quick, I was the fortunate student that when you were originally blocked, I started organizing a protest. So my disagreement comes, I do agree, we need faith and reason, of course, very useful things, but it seems that, I would guess maybe I was misinterpreting, but it seems that you think we're in a decline of reason and it's going to be the downfall possibly of the American Western society. I would say that I've seen in history we've had different periods of romanticism, transcendentalism, possibly the Renaissance, the hippie movement in the 1960s, also paralleled by other movements of the founding of the United States, other great periods of time of the Age of Reason and things like that. So I would argue that maybe in 20 to 50 years, the United States will become on an incline of Age of Reason again, and we'll be fine. And that we're not going to parallel or dive deep down into the depths of nothingness and things like that. Would you agree or disagree? Did I misinterpret you?
No, so I think that it's possible. Maybe you're right. One of the reasons I'm pessimistic is because all of the ages that you mentioned did still have a Judeo-Christian underpinning to which we return. Because one of the arguments that I make is that the notion of reason itself is rooted in certain assumptions about humanity and our purpose. Let's take the secular materialist view for a second, the scientific materialist view, which I oppose my view to, I think, in a dichotomous fashion. The scientific materialist view argues that we're basically balls of meat wandering through space. We don't have will. We are a series of biologically adaptive neurons that evolve over time to ensure the spread of our species. And that means that reason itself is not particularly important to that mathematics. It's only important so long as it's evolutionarily beneficial, but there's no moral component to reason. There's nothing that makes reason moral. The only thing that makes reason moral, presumably, would be greater spread of the species. But even that can be achieved through force, most obviously. So you need the assumption that human beings are more than a ball of meat wandering through space in order to believe that reason is important. The value of reason, in other words, is a moral viewpoint. Saying that reason is important is a moral viewpoint. And I think that we are now moving beyond that, and that's what scares me. When I see people who are saying reason itself is a disaster area. So I think that there are some elements to the romantic and transcendental movements of the 19th century that were an attempt to revert to religion. They were saying there are limits to reason. They were saying not that reason is totally wrong, but that people who are attempting to create these cloud castles based on reason alone are bound to fail because there's more to the human being than just sitting in a room and mathematicking things out. So that I think there was truth to that. I think that was an attempt to rise to a spiritual call. But what I'm seeing right now is not an attempt to rise to a spiritual call. It's an attempt to sink to a spiritual depth. It's an attempt to sink into feelings and subjectivism and emotion and my truth. And all that matters is what I feel today, not even what I think and what I've logicked out, what I feel today. That's why I think that the gender versus sex issue is a really good case in point of this. Sex exists. Men are men. Women are women. Trying to pretend a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man in fully anti-scientific fashion because it makes people feel bad to say otherwise is just emotion over reason. I'm scared of that, and I'm seeing a rise in that. I think the reversion to tribalism is reason being put to the side, shunted aside, in favor of tribal affinity, which is an emotional response, a natural but paganistic emotional response. That's what I'm afraid of. So the argument that I would make is that in the past, when all of these emotional movements came to the fore, there was still a religious undergirding that allowed us to return to reason, and there was a vacillation between emotion and reason, but you still had this other pole of the bridge. So my metaphor is that civilization is built on this bridge. Here's Jerusalem, here's Athens. And if Athens starts to waver, Jerusalem's still here. So the bridge is wobbly, but Jerusalem is still here. Well, what happens when both of them just disappear? And that's what I'm worried about right now. Jerusalem disappears, and then reason starts to gradually move toward the waterline. There's nothing left to hold it up on the other side. So listen, I pray that you're right. I hope and I pray that you're right. I hope that we're part of the movement that reinvigorates the need for reason.
You said earlier that a lot of are uncomfortable looking at pictures of children that are being aborted. Yeah, I would say that you and many other would feel equally uncomfortable looking at pictures of Sandy Hook victims who were shot. How can you honestly stand up here and say that you support abortion, you support government intervention, you support government intervention to make abortion illegal, which is designed to kill someone, and yet you can stand up here and say you don't want government intervention for guns, which are also designed to kill people? Because
guns are not designed to kill children. Guns are designed to kill bad guys if operated by a proper person. There's not an abortion in the world that doesn't end with the death of a baby. Honestly, the reason, I have no problem with looking at the pictures of gun violence victims other than the problems any other human being, left or right, would have with looking at those pictures, which is that they're horrific and deeply disturbing and very upsetting. But I don't feel any sense of guilt or avoidance. Like, I can't look at this picture because I bear some sort of responsibility for this. It is impossible not to look at a picture of an aborted baby and say this was disconnected from the act that I approve, because the act is the killing of the baby. There's no policy that I approve of that ends with the murder of children. Okay, there is a policy that is designed for the murder of children, which is what abortion is. Yeah, that's fine. You can have a quick follow-up. That's fine, sir.
Okay, so but if all people, right, you said that once the cells come together, you said those are considered people, which I can understand. I can get behind that.
I said that's considered a human life.
A human life, right.
Yes.
Why is this human life being killed and another human life being killed by gun violence? Why is that any different?
Again, it's not a matter of the value of the human life being different. It's equally as evil and tragic and horrific and disgusting when people kill fully formed children who are outside the womb. My point is that the act that connects to the killing of the children is not connected to my position on guns. The act that connects to the killing of unborn babies is connected to the legalization of abortion. The reason that I want people to be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights is to shoot pieces of like the people who go into schools and shoot up children. Right? I have two kids. They both go to a Jewish school, which means they are on the target list for somebody out there. Right? Jewish schools are disproportionately targeted, unfortunately, in the United States. I went to a Jewish school when I was in high school. There were bomb threats legitimately every couple of months. In 1999, there was a white supremacist who drove by our Jewish day school, saw an armed guard outside, proceeded to drive away, went to the West Valley JCC, and shot up the West Valley JCC. The reason that I'm in favor of gun rights is because I want that armed guard outside carrying the gun to dissuade people from going inside the school and shooting the kid.